We hadn't all been together in the same place for over a decade. Not because of distance. Not because of money. Because of something no one ever named out loud. Families don't always explode when they fall apart. Some just go quiet. Conversations shorten. Invitations stop coming. Holidays become optional instead of expected. And before you realize it, years pass without anyone asking why. The invitation arrived in early spring. Simple. Cream-colored. Handwritten. You're invited to celebrate the marriage of Emily Carter. I read it twice before the name fully settled in my mind. Emily was my cousin. The youngest. The one everyone used to protect. The one we all assumed would somehow bring us back together someday, even if we never said it. Her wedding was being held at a lakeside lodge in Vermont. The same place our family used to vacation every summer before everything fell apart. I stared at the invitation longer than necessary. Some places hold memories. Others hold truths you've been avoiding. The lodge wasn't just a location. It was where arguments first started. Where silences grew long. Where my grandfather stopped coming after he got sick. Where we all quietly agreed not to return. And now, after more than 10 years, we were being asked to go back. The drive there was quiet. Too quiet. My mother sat beside me in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, staring out the window like she was preparing herself for something she couldn't quite name. The road stretched ahead, long and narrow, surrounded by trees just beginning to bloom. "We don't have to stay long," she said finally. She said it casually, like it was just a practical thought. But I knew better. That's how I knew she was scared. The lodge looked exactly the same. Same wooden beams. Same dock stretching into the lake. Same smell of pine and water that always made me feel younger than I was. Time hadn't touched the place. But it had touched us. Cars filled the parking lot, luggage was being unloaded. People hugged carefully, like they weren't sure how much closeness was allowed anymore. Smiles were polite. Hugs were brief. Conversations stopped when certain names came up. My uncle avoided my mother completely. My aunt spoke only in short, careful sentences, like every word was being measured before it left her mouth. And my grandfather's chair, the one he used to sit in every summer, facing the lake, was empty. No one mentioned him. Some absences are louder than words. That night, the rehearsal dinner was held outside. A long wooden table. Soft string lights overhead. Wine poured too freely. Emily stood up to thank everyone for coming. Her voice shook just slightly as she spoke about family, forgiveness, and choosing to begin again. I noticed the way people looked down at their plates when she said that. That was when my aunt stood up. "Before we celebrate," she said, her voice calm but firm, "there's something that shouldn't stay buried anymore." You could feel the air change. Some truths don't announce themselves. They wait for moments like this. The moment my aunt stood up, every small sound seemed louder. A fork clinked against a plate. Someone cleared their throat. The lake water moved gently against the dock, unaware of what was unfolding. She didn't rush her words. "I didn't come here to ruin a wedding," she said. "But I also didn't come here to keep pretending." No one interrupted her. We were all too used to pretending. She talked about the summer everything changed. The summer my grandfather got sick. He had been strong for as long as I could remember. The kind of man who woke up early, fixed things with his hands, and never complained even when he should have. That summer, he stopped fishing, stopped swimming, stopped sitting on the dock in the evenings. Instead, he stayed inside, resting more than usual, insisting it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. She talked about hospital visits, about quiet conversations in hallways, about paperwork that appeared suddenly, filled with words no one wanted to read. Medical bills, power of attorney, accounts that needed signatures. "I was told not to worry," my aunt said. That everything was being handled. She looked directly at my mother. My mother's face drained of color. "I didn't know," my mother said quietly. But my aunt wasn't finished. She talked about money that disappeared. Not stolen. Not exactly. Just moved. Funds shifted between accounts. Expenses paid without explanation. Decisions made without discussion. It wasn't about greed, my aunt said. It was about control. That word landed heavily on the table. Control. My uncle pushed his chair back slightly. "That's not fair," he said. "You weren't there every day." "And you didn't ask to be," she replied. Voices began to rise. Memories collided. Each person remembered the same summer differently. One remembered exhaustion. Another remembered fear. Another remembered resentment for being shut out. No one remembered the full picture. Years of silence had filled in the gaps with assumptions. And assumptions harden into truth if left alone long enough. My mother finally spoke. "I was trying to protect him," she said. "And all of you." Her voice broke on the last word. Protect. That word sounded different to everyone at the table. Protection to one person can feel like betrayal to another. Emily stood up then. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just spoke clearly. "This wedding isn't about pretending," she said. "It's about deciding what kind of family we want to be now." She looked around the table. "At least let the truth finish before we decide." No one argued. The wine glasses sat untouched. The food grew cold. And for the first time in over a decade, no one walked away. The air stayed heavy long after Emily sat back down. No one reached for their glass. No one touched their food. My aunt took a breath, slower this time, like she was deciding how much truth the room could survive. "There's something you don't know," she said, her eyes fixed on the lake instead of us. "Something Grandpa asked me to keep quiet about." My mother stiffened. "He didn't want to be a burden," my aunt continued. "That's what he said. He knew the bills were growing. He knew the tension was already there." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope, yellowed at the edges. "He wrote this a few weeks before he stopped coming here." The sight of it changed the room. Paper shouldn't feel heavy. But that one did. My aunt didn't open it. She didn't need to. "He told me he didn't want his illness to be the reason we stopped being a family," she said. "But that's exactly what happened." She looked at my mother again. "He asked you for help," she said softly. "And when you didn't respond the way he hoped, he stopped asking." My mother's hands trembled in her lap. "I didn't know he felt that way," she whispered. "He never said." "He didn't want to," my aunt interrupted gently. "He thought silence was easier." That word again. Silence. It had been protecting all of us in different ways. And hurting all of us the same way. My uncle finally spoke. "I thought you were handling everything," he said to my mother. "That you wanted it that way." My mother shook her head slowly. "I thought I was helping," she said. "I thought taking control would make things easier." Her voice cracked. "But I never asked how it felt to be on the other side of that help." The letter stayed unopened on the table. No one asked to read it. Some truths don't need to be spoken again to be understood. We already knew what it said. It said he was scared. It said he didn't want to be alone. It said he loved us. And that was the part that hurt the most. Later that night, after voices softened and people drifted away in small groups, I found Emily sitting alone on the dock. She stared at the water like she was counting reflections. "I didn't plan for this," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. But I don't regret it, she added. If I'm starting a marriage tomorrow, I didn't want to carry this silence into it. She skipped a stone across the lake. It sank quickly. Families don't break from one moment, she said. They break from everything that doesn't get said. That night, sleep came in pieces. Memories surfaced uninvited. Holidays that felt smaller. Calls that never came. Questions no one thought they were allowed to ask. The lodge creaked softly in the dark, like it was listening. Morning arrived gently. Too gently, considering what the night had carried with it. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains, touching the wooden floors of the lodge like it was testing whether it was welcome. The lake outside was calm, almost indifferent, its surface smooth and unbroken. I woke up before anyone else. That used to be my grandfather's habit. He liked quiet mornings. Said they made it easier to think clearly before the world started talking too loudly. I made my way down the hallway, past doors still closed, past shoes lined neatly against the wall. Someone had left a jacket draped over a chair. A reminder that nothing ever really ends when you think it does. Outside, the dock felt colder than I remembered. The wood creaked under my feet as I walked toward the edge, the water lapping softly below. I sat where my grandfather used to sit, facing the trees across the lake. For a long time, I just listened. Birds. Wind. Water. No arguments. No explanations. Just space. My mother joined me without a word. She stood beside me, hands in her pockets, eyes fixed on the same distant point on the water. I should have asked him what he needed, she said finally. Not what she did wrong. Not what she meant. What he needed. That felt important. I thought being strong meant making decisions, she continued. I didn't realize how lonely that could feel from the other side. I didn't try to comfort her. Sometimes understanding needs to sit quietly before it turns into forgiveness. Later that morning, the lodge slowly came back to life. Coffee brewed. Doors opened. Voices returned softer this time. People avoided the long table from the night before. Too many memories. Instead, conversations happened in corners. On the porch. By the lake. One-on-one. My uncle apologized to my mother. Not for accusing her, but for assuming. I filled in the silence with my own story, he said. I never checked if it was true. She nodded. I did the same. Emily moved through the lodge like someone carrying two realities at once. A bride preparing for her wedding. and a granddaughter mourning the family she thought she had. Still, she smiled. Still, she thanked people for being there. Still, she chose to move forward. By early afternoon, chairs were arranged by the water. White flowers lined the aisle. The lake shimmered under the sun. Guests took their seats, some unsure of where they belonged anymore. When the music started, everyone stood. Emily walked down the aisle slowly. Not floating. Not rushed. Intentional. She looked at each face as she passed, like she was memorizing them. When she reached the front, she took a breath. And for the first time since arriving at the lodge, the air felt lighter. The ceremony began without any dramatic announcement. No sudden music. No whispered conversations. Just the quiet sound of the lake and the steady rhythm of breathing as everyone settled into their seats. Emily stood at the front, hands folded, shoulders relaxed in a way that suggested she had already made peace with whatever this day would bring. When she spoke her vows, she didn't rush. She spoke slowly, deliberately, like every word mattered. "I promise honesty," she said. "Even when it's uncomfortable. I promise to listen, especially when silence feels easier." Some people lowered their heads. Others stared at the water. A few wiped their eyes quietly. Those vows weren't just for the person she was marrying. They were for all of us. My mother watched the ceremony with her hands clasped tightly together. When Emily spoke about choosing presence over avoidance, my mother's grip loosened slightly. It was a small thing. But small things carry weight when you're paying attention. The officiant spoke about family. Not the ideal kind. Not the perfect kind. But the kind that shows up imperfectly and stays anyway. That part landed differently than it might have years ago. When the ceremony ended, there was applause. Not loud. Not explosive. But genuine. As if everyone was clapping for more than just a wedding. The reception followed shortly after. Tables were set under tall trees, sunlight filtering through leaves and casting shifting shadows across white tablecloths. Food was served. Wine was poured. And for the first time since arriving, laughter didn't feel forced. I watched as relatives who hadn't spoken in years found themselves standing near one another. At first, there was only polite nodding. Then small comments about the weather. About the food. About how much Emily looked like her grandmother. Eventually, memories crept in. Carefully. My uncle raised a glass. Not to make a speech. Just to say, "I'm glad we came." No one argued with that. Later, as music played softly, I saw my mother dancing with my aunt. Not close. Not emotional. Just willing. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was movement. And movement matters. As the sun began to set, the lake reflected the sky in deep shades of orange and blue. The day had held its shape. It hadn't collapsed under the weight of the night before. Instead, it had absorbed it. That evening, people lingered longer than expected. No one rushed back to their rooms. No one checked their watches. Some moments don't want to be shortened. As the reception wound down, the guests began to drift away. Some said their goodbyes quickly, offering hugs that felt rehearsed. Others lingered, hesitant to return to their cars or hotel rooms. The lake was quiet again, mirroring the sky that had shifted from gold to deep purple. Shadows stretched across the lodge grounds, and the first stars appeared, twinkling faintly over the water. I found my mother sitting alone on a bench by the dock, her hands folded over her knees. The envelope from my aunt had been placed back in her bag, unopened. "I don't know if I can fix what's broken," she said quietly. "You don't have to fix it," I replied. "You just have to understand it." She looked at me, eyes wet, and nodded slowly. Understanding doesn't always come quickly. Sometimes it arrives in fragments, in pieces, over long conversations, over quiet mornings and evenings. Across the dock, I noticed my uncle speaking with my aunt. Their voices were soft, words almost swallowed by the breeze. "I didn't realize how much silence had hurt," he said. "Neither did I," she replied. "We all thought we were protecting each other. But we were just isolating ourselves." It was strange to witness. Arguments and resentment had existed for decades, but here, in hushed tones, it was dissolving. Slowly. Carefully. Emily joined us for a moment. "I never wanted this wedding to feel like a punishment," she said. "It's meant to be a beginning. A beginning. Not an apology. Not a fix. Just a decision to start over, imperfectly, with honesty." Later, my mother finally opened the envelope. It was a letter from my grandfather, written before he became too weak to communicate clearly. "I love you all," it began simply. "I wanted to be there, but I feared I would make things worse. Please remember the lake, not the arguments. Please speak to each other, even when it is uncomfortable. Love is louder than silence." No one spoke at first. Just the sound of the water lapping at the dock. The words felt heavier than any argument, heavier than any unresolved fight. By that evening, the tension had not disappeared. But it had shifted. From anger to reflection. From blame to understanding. My mother and my uncle stood together for the first time in years, not hugging, not smiling, just standing side by side, quietly acknowledging the past. As the stars grew brighter over the lake, I realized something important. Families don't simply break because of a single lie or a single argument. They drift apart through years of silence, missed opportunities, and unspoken truths. And sometimes, it takes a shared moment, a wedding, a letter, a lake to pull them back together. That night, everyone gathered around the fire pit one last time. Conversations were tentative. Laughter returned slowly, in fits and starts. No one rushed to solve all the past mistakes in a single sitting. But honesty had finally arrived. And honesty, even when partial, is the first step toward healing. The morning after the wedding was calm, almost deceptively so. Sunlight poured across the lodge, reflecting off the lake like a mirror. The dock, which had once been the silent witness to so much tension, now held an air of quiet possibility. Guests moved slowly, packing bags, saying soft goodbyes. Some hugged tightly, some simply nodded. There were no dramatic tears, no loud speeches. Just the gentle pull of hearts beginning to mend. My mother stood on the dock, watching as people loaded cars and whispered farewells. She took a deep breath, as if inhaling every word that had gone unsaid for decades. "They don't fall apart all at once," she said, almost to herself. "They drift, until someone decides to swim back." Her hands rested on the railing, gripping it like she was grounding herself. And for the first time in years, I saw her exhale without worry. Emily approached, carrying a small bouquet she had kept from the ceremony. "I wanted everyone to have a choice," she said softly. "To see the truth and decide how to respond. Not to be forced into forgiveness or resentment. Just choice." My mother smiled faintly, a smile that had been hidden under decades of worry. "I understand now," she said. "It wasn't a solution. It wasn't complete healing. But it was progress." In the lodge, my aunt and uncle shared coffee, sitting side by side in silence. Words weren't necessary. Their shared presence said enough. The letter from my grandfather remained on the table. It had been read by my mother, my uncle, and quietly glanced at by a few others. Its presence lingered in the room, reminding everyone that truth, even delayed, carries weight. Later, I walked along the lake, watching ripples spread out from skipped stones. I thought about the summers that had passed, the holidays that had shrunk, the arguments that had never fully formed because no one dared speak first. The lake didn't judge. It simply reflected what was placed before it. And today, it reflected honesty. A fragile, tentative honesty. By mid-afternoon, most guests had left. Only the immediate family lingered, quietly cleaning, picking up plates, folding chairs, leaving nothing behind but memories. The lodge felt lighter, as if it, too, had been holding its breath. We didn't talk about the past in detail. We didn't try to fix everything at once. We simply existed together, for a little while, sharing space without the weight of decades pressing down. As evening fell, the sky turned a soft lavender, mirrored in the calm lake. We gathered briefly on the dock, hands in pockets, shoulders brushing lightly. Words weren't needed. Everyone understood, in some unspoken way, that a step had been taken, a step toward reconciliation, toward noticing one another, toward being present despite years of silence. When the last car drove away, leaving only the lake and the lodge behind, the world seemed still. But we all knew it had changed. Not dramatically. Not instantly. But subtly, irrevocably. The distance that had separated us for over a decade had begun to shrink. And for some, that was enough. The next morning, the lodge was quiet. Sunlight filtered softly through the windows. The air smelled faintly of pine, coffee, and the faint traces of yesterday's celebration. No one was rushing. No one was pretending. For the first time in over a decade, we all existed in the same space without tension pressing down on us. My mother walked to the dock again, holding a warm mug of coffee. She looked out over the lake. "I finally understand," she said softly, almost to herself. "Families drift apart slowly, and sometimes you have to choose to swim back." Her words hung in the air. Not dramatic. Not perfect. But full of meaning. My aunt joined her. They didn't speak immediately. They just stood together, watching the water ripple with each gentle breeze. "You did good," my aunt finally said. "Not perfect. Just good enough to start." My mother smiled faintly. "Good enough," she repeated. Throughout the day, private conversations unfolded quietly. Uncles, aunts, and cousins shared memories, laughter, and even tears. Some remembered summers differently, some remembered the silence that had grown over time. But each conversation brought clarity. Emily and her new spouse packed their things carefully, taking moments to thank each relative personally. "This wedding was never just about us," Emily said. "It was about giving everyone a chance to reconnect." Her words weren't boastful. They were intentional. By late afternoon, we gathered one last time at the dock. We didn't hug. We didn't make speeches. We simply acknowledged that the past had shaped us, but it didn't have to define our future. The lake reflected a calm sky, orange and blue blending softly. And for the first time in years, it seemed like we could breathe again. Before leaving, my mother wrote a note, tucking it inside the envelope from my grandfather. We didn't all swim back together. But some of us did. And that is enough. I am ready to try again. She placed the envelope carefully on the dock, where the water could catch the light. It was a small act, but it carried enormous weight. As we drove away from the lodge, the conversations were quiet but genuine. There were no promises to fix everything immediately. No assumptions that silence would return. Just a shared understanding. A choice to notice one another. A choice to swim back. Some families never recover. Some families drift too far apart. But ours had begun. And that beginning, no matter how fragile, was worth everything.